Hello, I'm Chris Reese with Atlanta Soundworks, and welcome to Tech Talk Tuesday. This is number 3 in our 4-part series called Before You Build. Before we get to number 3, let's go back over the first 2. So these are tips on how to maximize your technology budget, how to get the most out of that technology budget in a new project. And you really want to think about this before you start moving down the trail of that project. So the first one was identify and engage the proper stakeholders. Make sure you're talking to the right end users, people that are going to be able to use it, and gathering those requirements so that you spec the right system and you're not having to make changes later, or you make a big investment in a system that doesn't get used because it does not meet the requirements of the end users. The second is to engage your system designers and engineers early in the process, during the design phase. You wouldn't think about calling the plumber or the electrician or the HVAC person after you've already built the house, got the sheetrock up, and then said, okay, now I've got my house, I need to think about what I'm going to do about plumbing, electricity, and air conditioning and heat. That would be crazy, okay? So that was step number 2. And while you think these may be absolutely obvious, I cannot tell you how many times, in fact, I had it happen to me just this last week. Somebody's already pretty far down the road, and they come to us and they say, hey, we need to talk about getting this particular system installed in our building. So those are number 1 and number 2. Engage the proper stakeholders, identify and engage proper stakeholders early. Number 2, engage a low voltage system engineer and designer during the design phase of the project. So now that brings us to number 3. Number 3 is experiential design and planning. So we've all experienced the restaurant that was so noisy you couldn't even carry on a conversation with somebody across the table. Or maybe you've been in that auditorium and I don't know, for whatever reason, they couldn't get the sound right, and it was just feedback, or you couldn't hear clearly. It was just a poor experience. So what effect did that have on your perception of that brand when you think back to that memory, right? The experience in your space is a direct reflection on your brand, and there's no such thing as a neutral experience. So by taking the time to consider the client and employee experience you want associated with your brand and allowing that to drive design, you're going to know what and how technology is going to play a role in that design. And you can bake it into the space from the beginning. One industry that does this extremely well, we've already talked about most of your larger chain restaurants, but another industry that does this really well is the hospitality industry. Just take Marriott brands for just one moment, and it's way more than the Marriott, right? You've got Spring Hill and Courtyard, you've got Aloft, which is very non-traditional, and then you've got the Marriott brand, then you've got JW Marriott, you've got the W, and then you've got Ritz-Carlton, right? And each one of those brands is designed to create a different brand experience, right? Even as I said those brand names, different emotions may have come to mind. Maybe they were positive, maybe they were negative. There was a brand experience. If it was negative, I guarantee it had to do somehow with how you experienced that space, because the way you experience a space, in addition to the interaction you have with the people in that space that represent the brand, but the space itself, right? You go into a hotel and the lobby can be great. You walk in there and it's got, very warm, inviting lighting. The surfaces, the textures are very warm and inviting. And it might be a brand that you really relate to. So when you travel, you like to book at that particular hotel brand. But then you get up in your room and the shower doesn't drain, or the shower head doesn't spray properly, right? What does that do? Even down to the thickness of the towels, the quality of the toilet paper. I have a friend that actually, this is what she does for one of the major hotel brands, is focus on designing that brand experience for their guest. And I tell you, they go down. We had a long conversation just about toilet paper one time on a trip that we were on together. So one of the best ways to do this is, when you think about your space, take somebody, actually animate, bring to life the character of somebody that you want to interact with your space. So this could be a new client, right? So imagine, if you will, this new client arriving in your space for the first time. So they step off the elevator. What is their experience, right? Is their experience difficult to find? The place smells musky. The lighting is not very good. It looks like it needs some maintenance. The staff is not very friendly. Technology looks dated, right? Every one of these is a reflection upon your brand. Or is it well lit, but warm and inviting, not overly bright? What are the surfaces and textures within the space? What are the materials used within the space? Do they align with the values of your brand, right? Part of your brand, one of your brand values may be sustainability, right? So are you using sustainable materials in the finishes within your space? These are things you have to think about, right? Lighting. How does somebody interact? What's the wayfinding? There's all sorts of things, right? The sound level, even down to the smells that are associated with that space. Smell is such a powerful, powerful sense. It brings back so many memories, and those can be associated both positively and negatively. So how can you use that sense of smell to create a positive interaction with your brand? The sounds, what's playing within that waiting space? Is anything playing? Then you hear conversations. Do you have some sound masking going on so that you create just kind of a, white noise type environment? So it's all these things that go into experiential design and planning. And so that is tip number 3. You need to think through and actually write out the experience, create it like a story, the experience you want someone to have with your space as they enter that space. And don't forget, employees are important too, because you can't create a brand experience that's totally customer facing and neglect your employees. If the experience the employees have don't align with the experience you want your clients to have, you've got a misalignment there. And guess what? Those employees are not going to deliver on your brand promise for those clients. You can't consistently, I think Zig Ziglar said it, you can't consistently perform in a manner inconsistent with how you see and view yourself. So that's tip number 3. So tip number 1 was identify, engage the right stakeholders. Tip number 2 was engage your system designers and engineers during the design phase of the process. And tightly related to that is think through your experiential design and planning during that design phase. What is the experience you want associated with your brand in that space? That's it. So join us next week for our conclusion, part 4 of our 4-part series. Again, I'm Chris Reese for Atlanta Soundworks, and this has been Tech Talk Tuesday.